Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and the bins that you see out here are my African nightcrawlers. And they're the African nightcrawlers that I got from Northeast Worms. And when I started this bin right here, 69 days ago, I had received what was an estimated 500 worms, but within the material that the worms were inhabiting, I also was told there was a bunch of little tiny baby worms mixed in, as well as cocoons that would eventually hatch into baby worms as well. So this has just been treated as a regular everyday worm bin. It's already received 9 feedings up until now. And what happened 23 days ago here, which is the age of this bin, was that we started recruiting adult worms out of the bin here to start populating what I'm now kind of referring to as the adult bin, leaving the babies and the to-be hatched cocoons in this system, because it was brought to my attention that if you take adult worms away from the babies, then they'll remain large in size, but if you leave them commingled with the baby worms, they'll start to lose mass and start to lose size, and they'll end up becoming little puny African night crawlers as opposed to big huge African night crawlers that are the length of your hand. So I thought it would be an interesting experiment to see if it is possible to preserve the size of the worms by keeping them away from the baby worms. And I assume that's just going to translate into an ongoing process where here too eventually there's going to be cocoons and babies hatching, and then a future need to move the adults out, move them on so that they could preserve their good size. 9 days ago we last fed these systems. They were all given very easy to eat kind of foods like the peels of carrots, cucumber peels in bits, and coffee, all kinds of materials that I assume are just going to be gone 1, 2, 3. 9 days later, I doubt we're going to see many leftovers. Maybe some banana peel bits. Those sometimes take a little bit longer than that, but we'll see. So I was going to get into these systems and feed, and I also thought I might do a little bit more recruiting of adult worms out of the older bin into the newer bin. And then at some point, I think we're going to have kind of a population that balances out. And then I'll be able to eventually move these guys into a larger bin, which is kind of on my to-do list, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So I'm going to get a glove on and we'll get to work. It was up until 9 days ago during our last check-in when we changed coverings in this bin from plastic to all paper and cardboard based. So this piece of newspaper was fashioned 9 days ago and placed in here as the replacement cover for what had been plastic coverings. I always start out with plastic coverings because I'm always really worried about the material in my bins drying out abruptly without me even noticing it. It just seems like plastic is almost like a rock solid way to ensure that whatever moisture's in there doesn't have the ability to evaporate, dry out. But eventually the bin will get to the point where I feel confident in the fact that the bin has its own ability to hang on to moisture. And that's mainly because all the loose leaves and cardboard and paper that had been placed in here over time had been gradually turned into castings. And then castings, compared to all that other stuff, just has, far superior ability to hang on to moisture that's held within it. And that's when I start to feel like I don't need to worry about the moisture in the bin. Alright, so what we're going to do here, I guess, is use my little collection tub to snag any large worms we encounter as we check through here, and when we're done we'll create a nice little opening in the middle into which we could place some food. I'll need to run up to the kitchen to grab stuff to feed them with because I didn't come down here equipped with food. But we'll take a quick pause at that time so I can go grab food for this bin as well as the other bin, and then we'll get around to feeding both, as well as relocating some adult worms from the so-called baby bin to the adult bin. It's something I got to get used to. It's something I've never even known about. This whole thing of isolating the adults from the babies, and the side effect of that being the preservation of the size of the worms. I mean, I'm starting to wonder what the heck's going on here, because I've not yet seen even one worm. What the heck? Hopefully they're down in the middle where the food was, because I don't see any worms yet. Perhaps I had just gotten used to the effects of the plastic coverings with there being dampness across the top. I guess that just naturally results in worms being there to collect the moisture under the plastic. But if that's not been happening for the past 9 days, maybe they've been drawn elsewhere in pursuit of more moisture. Alright, is it just me? Am I going blind? Is it true that we've not even encountered a single worm yet? This is a very unusual check-in. Starting to feel like I should just go, all out and start really digging, figure out what the heck's going on here. Where are all the worms? What is going on here? I just spotted one worm here, maybe two. Okay, maybe three. They all look very small. I wonder if these are some of the little baby worms that I was told to expect to begin appearing on the scene here. I guess, especially if we do succeed in recruiting some adult worms from this bin, this will ultimately turn into a bin with just either, newborns or very baby young worms. I'm still kind of not certain about making the call on what constitutes an adult worm versus what constitutes a still juvenile worm. I mean, this worm looks like it's got some good size to it. Just with all the debris stuck to him, it looks like it's maybe not yet developed clitellum, but I could just not be seeing it clearly. Here we've got a somewhat larger worm, which I would definitely consider as a adult at this point. So let's see what we can do as far as rounding up more adult worms, and I don't think we need to worry too much because I'm sure there's going to be just more and more babies emerging over time in here. These little guys are so dark. I'm not used to the dark color. I'm used to somewhat lighter colored worms. So these African nightcrawlers and that kind of deep purplish color of theirs really helps them blend in. It's almost difficult to spot them when you're looking for them. Should I count? I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. That might be our fourth worm. It'd be kind of cool to keep track of it, right? Because in the past we had more or less been able to keep track of how many worms we collected. Perhaps we could keep track here too. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 97. So easy to lose track, especially me. I'm not really doing a good job paying attention. I'm getting more into looking for additional worms we could, bring over. But I don't want to take little ones. I'd rather really limit myself to taking what appeared to be adult worms. Was that 98? The level of the bin is reaching pretty high at this point too. Okay. 98 is the count, it seems, unless we really bump into some really large, impressive worms as we're putting things away here. But I'm going to have to take a short break to get some stuff to throw in here to feed with, and then we can continue. My bedding, my pre-made kind of damp mixture of shredded cardboard and paper and leaves, as well as a little bit of inoculant with some casting material thrown in there to introduce a little bit of life into the material. It's got this really nice kind of weird odor to it, you know, just, you know, smell of damp paper, I guess, but somehow fresh for some reason. I thought it might become a little bit funky or weird, but it's not. So we're going to go easy here so we don't end up giving them everything. We got to save some for the other bin. Stuff is just so frozen I could barely chip away at it, get it out of the bag, out of the freezer. So I don't think I'm going to have much luck breaking it up here. It's mango peels, and I believe there is a mango seed in there too. Kind of makes sense to put mango seeds into the other bin, the 23-day-old bin here. The bin that's 69 days old at this point, should it get a mango peel? Is it too old of a bin at this point? I don't know. Got a few little chunks of watermelon here too. Ooh, little chunks of ice flying everywhere. Well, let's give some to the other bin too, but we'll give some of it here. I don't know, I look at this feeding, it doesn't seem terribly moisture rich, doesn't seem very damp. And maybe I'm just overreacting about the dampness of the material. I think it does have a pretty good moisture content, this bin. I just, you know, maybe started panicking a little bit because I didn't find worms when we first got in there for a little while in the beginning, but I'm not sure it's necessary to do anything here. There's this additional moisture coming in. Do I cover up with plastic? Maybe, you know, there again, maybe I'll just treat this as sort of an observation that says, hey, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to add water or moisture at some point in the near future. But right now it's probably still okay, so I'm not going to react to it. But if next time we notice kind of a trend that it seems to be continuing to get drier in here, then, you know, maybe it would make good sense to squirt it down a little bit. So the feeding might not have appeared to be that much, but I treat all this paper and cardboard and everything that I drop in here along with the food as part of their feeding as well, not just an expansion of their domain or you know, an increase to their bedding material. For a while it is just an increase to their bedding material, but in time it all gets consumed by the worms, so it's just food in the long run. Alright, got the adults extracted. We got feeding number 10 in here on day 69. Slightly lower head count now, about 100 fewer worms now than what we had before. I am keeping track using the original estimate of 500. Then I deducted the haul out of adults from the last go around, as well as I can deduct the number of worms I'm hauling out this time too, and then I think we'll be getting close. We'll be getting close to the point where the estimated count of worms in both bins is about the same, but I still think that this system probably has more worms in it than the little container. So let's just leave this right here to indicate where we last fed. It'll just be one additional little layer of protection of keeping the moisture that's in the bin down and prevent it from evaporating away. So we'll hold off on putting plastic back on here, but you know, we've always got the option to do so, but for now I think we're actually in pretty good shape. So let's move on to releasing these little guys that we collected out of here into their new home after we apply the feeding that they're going to get. All right, let's get them out here next. Slightly smaller bin. Might make sense to drop the camera down a little bit and get it closer, since there's a much smaller size bin here, and that won't be for long. We'll get them upgraded into their nice new larger home soon, because now we're, you know, almost at a population that's equal to what we just took care of in the other container. Here the plastic is definitely probably a good idea. For a system that's still only 23 days old, I would think like all of this type of stuff is still very capable of just losing its moisture 1, 2, 3, even going down through it. as opposed to castings. Once you go down half an inch into castings, you're already like into material that's just as damp as the stuff that's 6 inches down. But this stuff is what I always worry about, is drying out abruptly without me noticing it, and then the poor worm inhabitants suffering as a result of that. So just not sure what to expect now after that other bin where it took us such a long time to finally start bumping into worms. So here too, it was more or less the same thing, just in a smaller scale that we had fed down the center of the container. Pretty much the same types of stuff: banana peels, cucumber peels, carrot peels, coffee. And I think we had actually used some of these pieces of cardboard somehow. This rings a bell too. We had found large chunks of paper tube, maybe paper towel tube or toilet paper tube. And we had laid those under where the food was put. Did I just say underwear? So childish, right, to even think that way. All right, so definitely finding some of the stuff we had placed under the feeding, such as these larger chunks of cardboard. Now we're starting to see a little bit of the residual moisture from the last feeding. I'm starting to see a few worms too. I can also see a little bit of grit. Did we add grit? Did I sprinkle crushed eggshell onto the feeding that we applied to the other container? I don't remember. Maybe not. Sometimes I forget, and that's fine. It's not important to do it every single time. So here's an adult worm. That's really all we had placed in here three or so weeks ago. The material right below where we had just fed is definitely very moist, very damp stuff. More large chunks of cardboard. Right in the firing line, it's what the food was placed on top of, those larger chunks of cardboard. So that would have been where all the moisture would have dropped onto. Pretty much soaking them with all the juices of all those veggies. Probably making that cardboard just as tempting to them as, or maybe even more tempting to them, as all those nice fresh bits of food that they'd received. So we don't have to go crazy ripping through this system, although we've already kind of upturned the whole half of it over here. Let's not subject these little guys to such stress. Not like the other bin, right? Why don't we just throw in today's food and be done with it? We don't have to go crazy here, bugging these little guys. We'll just kind of give them a similar setup like we did in the other bin, right? A little bit of this fresh homemade bedding material here. Even recycle some of this older bedding. Just make sure we knock the worms off of it, because they might not appreciate having all kinds of frozen junk piled on top of them. There's a banana stem. Every time I put something frozen in alongside, oh jeez. Could I be any more clumsy? Whatever, I'm not going to get into some sort of a big fancy arrangement with this food, it seems, because I've got half of it on the table. Well, it doesn't look like it was that bad. Spilled a little bit, but most of it went in the bin, luckily. Duh. Here too, this, I kind of remember when I folded this banana peel up before sticking it into the freezer, thinking, oh man, this is going to be a pain to open it up. But the bonus is here, the reason I did wrap it up like that is because there was a chunk of it that was all brown that I didn't eat. So there's a good meaty hunk of banana right in there, not just banana peels. So whatever, let's just get this stuff in here. Give them what they're getting. We've already got another coffee filter over there that's going to be used to mark where we last fed. We don't need to use this one. This one can just go in here as yet more supplemental bedding, like so, and then we could just level things off, get things covered up again here. Yeah, here it does seem like without the plastic covering, this bin could be in jeopardy of losing a lot of its moisture. And I did kind of stir a lot of the dry stuff I encountered along the way in with some of the damp stuff, which should, level things out here pretty nicely, I think, for the most part. And I always, try to apply a little bit of moisture credit to the bin too when I put in some food. And did I forget again? Maybe I'll just give them some, sprinkle it up on the top. A little bit of crushed eggshell as grit. Sometimes as a good food supplement for the worm bin. Doesn't have to be there every time, but once in a while it doesn't hurt to add it. So I've got those coverings to put back on here, but before we do that, why don't we introduce the worms that are moving over from the other bin into here to their new home. Let them go. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Make sure we get them all off the plastic container. I think we've got them all. And here are our, how many was it? 98 worms. Nice little patty of worms. Usually spread them out so we could better see them to try to count them at that time. We don't really need to do that. We'll just let them dive down into the bed naturally on their own. And then we can get things covered up here and put away and we'll be done. You know, when it comes to these kind of worms, you can sometimes really wait quite a while before all of them actually vanish out of view, because they don't really seem to be quite as bothered by the bright overhead lights as some of the other worm types that I've got. Sometimes these little guys will just hang out right on the surface for a really long time. And then I just finally say, enough of the filming, that's all you get. Time to call it a day. So that was kind of cool. I've been meaning to do this for a while. It's one of the to-dos when it comes to these systems. Taken care of now, kind of equalizing. Well, it's not even about equalizing. It's about continuing to move the adults away from where there's gonna be, or there already are, large numbers of baby worms. So it seems like it's sort of like an ongoing conveyor belt sort of thinking, where the creation of cocoons and the birth of baby worms is an ongoing, steady, continuous thing, which, you know, indicates that the process that goes along with it has to be managed in a continuous fashion too. So, well, you can see I've already cleaned off my gloves because I had enough time there. I left a lot of time for these little guys to sort of squirm down as far as they did before I decided it was time to end the video. So yeah, I've already cleaned up for the most part, and at this point it's really just putting this back on the shelf and we're done. So not a lot of cleaning up and putting away to do, but before I get into that, let me just say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.